Gary Neville has criticised the government's national insurance rise this year, telling the programme it could deter companies from employing people. The former Manchester United and England footballer is now a business owner who employs hundreds of people and vocally supported Labour at the last election. But this week, he was also appointed a brand ambassador of the business software firm Sage. And I began my interview with him by asking him about that partnership between him, Sage, and the Premier League.
The partnership with Sage, to be honest with you, came about 6 months ago, and I smile thinking about it because my dad was commercial manager at Bury Football Club, and my mum, initially going back 20 years, was helping with the bookkeeping, and they used to use Sage, and I used to hear this word when they would speak at night, bringing their work home with them all the time about, okay, I'll just go and sort of, I use Sage, I check Sage. Obviously, it's the sort of financial system that they used at Bury. And when you think about local communities and football clubs, I go back to sort of what would be Salford as an owner or Bury, but obviously at the higher end at United, if you think about all the thousands of fans that go and watch football matches, they rely upon being, serviced by local businesses in the area, whether it's a supermarket, whether it's the local pub, the restaurants, the shops, all the places that fans use on the way there. And the impact of football on the local community and local businesses is enormous. A local football club that's doing well in a city or a town has a big impact on the economy in a local city, and also not just the economy, but the spirit. And small businesses are a huge part of that.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating that we often talk about, the Premier League, don't we, and the big clubs, and actually how it's good for the UK kind of around the world, but we don't actually talk about those smaller clubs in the smaller towns, and as you said, the big economic impact they have weekends in, weekend out.
Absolutely. I think we do talk about the global game. We talk about the reach of the Premier League, which is great, and the fantastic sort of matches that we watch week in, week out. But, when I go back to watching United at the age of 5, United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and thinking of going to Marina's Grill, which was the chippy up at the top of the road, and basically going in with my dad and having sort of like fish and chips or sausage, chips, peas and gravy. That was our sort of a massive part of the day. Of course, we went for the football, but when fans go to watch football matches, they go and use the chippies, they go and have a drink in the local pub, they eat in the restaurants, they use the shops, they buy chocolate, they buy sweets, they do the things that basically families do. And they have a huge part to play, local businesses and the community around football stadiums. And football stadiums historically were built amongst the local communities. If you think of Goodison Park and Anfield as being two clubs in Liverpool and Main Road here in Manchester, United's slightly different, but there is a community around Manchester United as well. Football clubs were the heart of a community, and I think that's something that should never be lost.
And Gary, what do you think? I mean, I say this as someone who goes to quite a lot of matches over the years, and and I've been to lots of sporting events in America and elsewhere, that actually there's more opportunity here, isn't there, as well? Because actually, if you go to lots of sporting events as well, they're not just about the football game or the rugby match or whatever. There's kind of halftime shows and there's lots of other stuff going on. And we haven't quite got there yet, haven't we? Lots of our football matches are just about the game.
I don't think it is. Look, I know what you were saying. I think in America and sometimes other countries, there's maybe a greater theatre and event sort of around the match. But I think we have quite a tradition in this country and a history of how we do things. If you think of a group of friends going to the local pub before the match, working out what the team is, sort of who the manager should pick, and at the end of the game, they go back in that pub or in that bar or in that restaurant and they're debating, walking down the street, sort of arguing over referees' decisions, whether the team's won, celebrating and singing, obviously, if it's been a great day, and commiserating if it's been a bad day. I do think that forms a large part of what football is in this country. It certainly does for me still. I still think, obviously, sometimes I go to a lot of the games for Sky, but there are games that I go to at United and at Salford where I'm not working, where I still build something around it. I just don't turn up at 3:15 and leave at sort of 5:15. I think of what we're going to do first, where we're going to eat, are we going to go for a drink, who we're going to meet, and then after the game, you're thinking, right, what we're doing after the match. And I have to say, local businesses, local sort of, particularly hospitality businesses, have a huge part to play in that.
And of course, you're not a businessman yourself. You kind of see both sides of this coin. Well, what have you gained in terms of when you now work with those small businesses, the insight from actually investing and owning your own businesses in terms of the challenges that often actually they face?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, if you think next season Manchester United won't be in Europe, you think about the impact upon Manchester as a city in respect of sort of what would be the amount of visitors that come to a United European game, a Champions League game. It's an enormous impact when Manchester United, Manchester City, and this city are doing well or they're not doing so well. You know, you would literally are talking about people's jobs, you're talking about people's life being a lot easier, obviously, if the football team are doing well. And I think that's, you know, Manchester's a city that's got a huge element of music, sport, cultural events. And it relies upon those cultural events and sort of those sporting events to be able to fuel the city so that the city's busy and full. Obviously, it's got a great nighttime economy as well, Manchester, but it does rely upon these, you know, these things. And the club's doing well plays a huge part in that, not just in fan spirit and fan happiness, but all the local businesses, all the local sort of economy that basically benefits from Manchester United and Manchester City. And then if you take that into a smaller town, whether it be Grimsby town, if Grimsby are at home at a weekend, and I'm picking them because obviously some, you know, we play against them for Salford, you know, the impact upon the city or the town, sorry, of Grimsby in that weekend will be big when Grimsby are at home and they're playing a big game. So it is important that, you know, the football club is a huge part of the community in spirit, in energy, in feeling, but it's also a huge part of the sort of local business economy as well.
And Gary, just very finally on all of this, as I say, you know this, particularly the hospitality industry, better than lots of people do, and a lot of people who watch this programme run small businesses. But you've also been a supporter of the government, and lots of businesses feel that the taxation level, the increase in the minimum wage, is all being difficult at a time in which economically we're not doing that well. Do you understand the strain, I suppose, that many small businesses are feeling at the moment?
I do. I mean, look, it's been a tough economy now for a good few years, and I did think that once there was a change of government and once there was some stability, that we would get something settling. But it's not settling locally in our country, but it's not settling actually, to be fair, in many places in the world either. I don't think we can ever criticise a government for increasing the minimum wage. I honestly believe that people, to be fair, should be paid more. So I don't think that's something that you can be critical of. I do think that the national insurance rise, though, was a challenge. Accepting that we need to raise money for services. We all talk about the requirement of great transport, great education, great health service, great police and sort of emergency services. We all want these things in our lives. We want these things in our country, and the money's got to come from somewhere. But I honestly don't believe that, to be fair, companies and small businesses should be deterred from employing people. So I think the national insurance rise was one that I feel probably could have been held back, particularly in terms of the way in which the economy was. But I don't think we can be critical of increasing the minimum wage. I think that's something that ultimately we should all be championing, that people get paid more and that people are fairly looked after.
And just very finally, Gary, and quickly, I cannot not ask you about talking about turning things around. Can United turn things around in the next season?
That could
a big
be
ask. That's almost bigger than turning the economy around.
Yeah, that could be a bigger challenge to the economy. I was just going to say that. You took my line away. No, look, I'm heartened quite a bit by the fact that Manchester United over the last 10, 11 years have sort of accepted a position whereby they've made mistakes in the transfer market, or they've made mistakes in recruitment, or they've held on to players too long. It would seem that, to be fair, what's happening now is that Ruben Amorim is identifying players he does not want in the squad, and to be fair, he's moving them out of the squad. That's a positive. The second thing is, I do like, on paper, the signings of Cunha and Burmo. Why do I like them? A couple of reasons. Well, three actually. One is that they've got Premier League experience. One is that they look more like Manchester United styles of players with a bit more pace and power and the ability to have that sort of physicality to be able to get from box to box quickly. I think when you look at particularly Garnacho, Sancho, Anthony, they're more jinkers, I call them, more people who sort of work in tight spaces. I've always felt at United you need players that can open the legs up and really sort of stretch teams. And I think Cunha and Burmo do that. And then the other thing I like about those two signings is that they've not proved themselves at the highest level yet in the game in respect of a Premier League club level European club level. So they should be really desperate and hungry to prove themselves on a huge stage, which is Old Trafford. And that hunger hasn't always been there in the last 10 years with players that have come to the club. They've come maybe where they've been the more finished article and we've got excited by them, but maybe they've come and maybe not had that desperation. I always feel like a player needs hunger. They need desperation in the game to feel that it's the most important thing. I think these two lads that have signed will have that. So I think the two signings are good signings yet. There's a couple more needed. I think they need a goalkeeper. They need a centre forward. And I think if they can fill those two positions with decent signings, then United can have a lot. I mean, they have to have a better season than last year. It can't get any worse, really.